This guy, he has a private island, very wealthy financier, knows politicians, senators, congressmen. Why would that not be an attractive intelligence asset for either us or a foreign entity?
You have to know whether they're trustworthy, whether they can keep those secrets, whether they're going to talk too much, and whether they're controllable. As we can see, nobody controlled Epstein but Epstein. I don't think they would want to touch Epstein with a 10-foot pole.
Hey guys, it's Jakson with TMZ here. Today I interviewed a former CIA counterintelligence officer regarding Epstein. With the DOJ's release of the Epstein files, there's been a lot of speculation. Like I state later in this interview, a lot of conspiracy theories thrown around. It's gone as far as cannibalism, as satanic rituals, and the fact that, maybe he was an intelligence asset. So I thought that you guys needed some informative insight on this. And so I contacted Michelle Assad. Now, she spent a majority of her career analyzing complex criminal networks overseas and terroristic threats. Her main goal was to gather intelligence on these terrorist organizations and prevent potential attacks against the United States. The foundation of her work was to protect national security, so I thought that she would be an incredible source and interviewee for us today. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, because we read every single one. Let's get right into the interview. So I'm joined today by former counterintelligence operative at the CIA, Michelle Assad. She is also the author of 2 books, Get Off the X and Breaking Cover. Ms. Assad, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Jackson.
Of course. So look, there's a lot of discussion in the media with the recent release of the Epstein files from the DOJ that Epstein was an intelligence asset. Now, people are throwing theories at the wall and just seeing what sticks, it seems. You hear rumors about KGB, CIA, Mossad. I'm wondering, why would intelligence use someone like Epstein, and what's the likelihood that he actually was an intelligence asset?
Well, I see the fascination. I see why people are asking these questions. I see why this has really grabbed people's attention. But I remain unconvinced that he was anyone's intelligence source or asset. And the reason why I say that is because Epstein created a narrative of his life that was really a house of cards. And he was very strategic about building relationships. He was such a good manipulator. Boy, he knew how to collect relationships in order to advance himself. And while some of my former colleagues at the CIA might have believed a guy like that, might have kind of bought into that, because I worked with people who didn't question things enough, I don't think the Israelis are like that. I think they're far more sophisticated intelligence agency, and I don't think they would want to touch Epstein with a 10-foot pole. That man had baggage, and for sure, the Israelis would have known exactly what the baggage was. And so when you're considering recruiting someone to be your source, you have to know whether they're trustworthy, whether they can keep those secrets, and whether they're going to talk too much, and whether they're controllable. And he was none of those things. As we can see, nobody controlled Epstein but Epstein. He talked so much, and he used every relationship to impress other people. They would never trust him with being a source. It would be too risky for the Israelis or CIA.
I like that you bring up Israel, because it raises another question of mine where, it's been reported that former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Yoni Koren, who was a senior intelligence officer for Mossad, was staying at Epstein's Manhattan estate for sometimes weeks at a time in between 2013 and 2015. Does that not open the door for someone like Epstein to become an intelligence asset, if you will, for a foreign entity?
I bet he thought so. I bet that was part of his calculation in rubbing shoulders with certain people. And he thought, I'm speculating, obviously, but I'm sure he thought, if people see me with A, B, or C, like former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, or an Israeli intel officer that people speculate might be involved with intelligence, or he's shadowy enough to make people wonder. He that's part of his overall calculation, but I still don't remain unconvinced that that means anything other than, boy, he was good at rubbing shoulders with all the right people.
Right, yeah. Especially when you consider, this is an unverified claim, but one of his lawyers at one point is rumored to have said that the 2008, what people call a sweetheart deal, after he got convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution, the sweetheart deal was prompted by the fact that he was an intelligence asset both for domestic and foreign entities. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't quite know what to make of that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if we used to say back in the old days, the Rolodex. So all the
Mhm.
phone numbers you have, all your contacts. I wouldn't be surprised if he connected, really famous and important people with other important people and made himself of use to someone at some point, and then that was used as some sort of like, stay away from him. He's made a connection before. I don't think we would have, even if he was run as an access agent, it would have been just for a short period of time in order to get to a particular target. But I don't think he had the kinds of, I think we could have come up with those connections on our own without Epstein, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense. Like he wasn't so integral to like world events that we needed that guy to do it for us.
Right. But if you take into consideration, I mean, this guy, he has a private island, very wealthy hedge fund manager, very wealthy financier, knows politicians, senators, congressmen. He's hanging out with the Israeli prime minister, Bill Clinton, allegedly. Why would that not be an attractive intelligence asset for either us or a foreign entity?
Again, it goes back to that whole, you can't recruit someone unless you can actually trust them. And if they're
Mhm.
not going to talk about it, this is such a big part of, it goes into our calculation of how we bring on board new sources. And so we have to really look at their background because we have to know what's motivating them. And then we have to look like, can we control this person? I know that sounds a little bit
Mhm.
weird, but
Mhm.
that's how we talk. Can we influence that person, or are they just so out of control? And I don't think we would have made the calculation that it was worth it with him. But boy, did that man know how to
Yeah.
connect. Boy,
Yeah, I know.
that's how he even got people thinking he was a hedge fund manager, because he
Mhm.
wasn't.
Mhm.
He made no trades.
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
made everybody think he was a self-made billionaire. He wasn't. I mean,
Mhm.
he was self-made in the sense that, as far as we can tell, it was fraudulently obtained. But even
Right.
now, we're still saying these things, right?
Right. Now, a recently surfaced FBI memo that was released in the DOJ's files states that uh, an informant told the FBI that he believed that Epstein was co-opted by Mossad. And from your experience, what does co-opted mean in intelligence?
It probably means different things to different intelligence agencies, but
Mhm.
for the US intelligence, for the CIA, co-opted means there's some level of pressure. Like
Mhm.
they're not entering into that relationship happily.
Right.
You hold some leverage over them. It's not a good way to recruit people. In fact, in the CIA, we're not allowed to co-opt anyone.
Mhm.
They have to come into that relationship full well knowing the risks that they
Mhm.
run working with you. Um, Let me just say this. Having dealt with hundreds of lying and manipulative sources, just because a source said something means nothing to me at all.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
a report like that, I just laugh at. I'm like, if I told you how many sources that I met with who told me they knew where Osama bin Laden was located, I
Mhm.
would be
Yeah.
a
It's like
very wealthy person. So
right.
you have to vet and verify everything coming out of their mouths.
I understand. Wow. I mean, yeah, it is an interesting topic of discussion because I feel like, when files like these are released, people have been calling for the release of these files for a very, very long time. And there are a plethora of conspiracy theories. He was a cannibal. He did satanic rituals. He was an intelligence asset. I think the waters are, it's very easy for the waters to get muddied. And so I'm wondering, do you think that he played any role in aiding in the US government in anything at all?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he connected so many people. I mean, when you look at those emails, you can see he's always making connections. Oh,
Yeah.
you want to meet so and so? Here's his phone number. Or
Mhm.
I'll write the introductory email. Like that man connected. That's how he built up this incredible network of royals and presidents and quite the entourage. He was such a master at playing that game. So I have no doubts that he propelled himself forward by making other people connect with people they wanted to be around or wanted to have business with or wanted some time with. For sure, he did that.
Is there anything that you saw personally in the Epstein files that raised a red flag for you, where you thought this could be a huge, this could open up a huge vulnerability for the US?
Gosh, there's so much material that it's
Really? Yeah.
really hard. But the thing that always amazes me
Hmm.
is how quickly people trust what other people say.
Right.
I am so incredibly amazed that President Clinton and his entourage and Ehud Barak and all of these world leaders so quickly accepted him into their group. Like how it's quite amazing what a skilled master manipulator he is. But I'll tell you the other thing that I've been fascinated by, the few people who said I met him and I saw right through him.
Hmm. Yeah.
There aren't many people because he fooled so many, but there are a few that were like, I'm an astrophysicist and he tried to talk to me about black holes and I could tell he was just trying to impress me and he wasn't even smart.
Yeah.
So you ask a few questions like, have you actually ever made a trade on the stock market? Do you have a trading number?
Hmm.
No, he didn't. It's very easy to confirm whether this man was a hedge fund manager, which
Yeah.
he wasn't. So, but it's interesting how many people were taken by his greed and the narrative he constructed. But then I'm always interested in the people who didn't buy in. And they're like, I can't even stand in the same room with this guy.
In your experience, if you're working in intelligence and you are close with a prime minister who is going to go meet with someone that, a wealthy financier in another country, what are you telling that prime minister? Because obviously you can't trust this person, right? We don't know what his intentions are. It could be linked to, an intelligence agency from an opposing country. We don't know. What are you warning the prime minister about in that situation, going into that situation?
Yeah, so we've actually had my husband and I, who's also an intelligence officer with the CIA, had a situation like this after we left the CIA, where we were advising a European company that they were meeting with a gentleman who said he had hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in their company. So it was a similar situation. Like, can you prepare us for this meeting with this guy who says all kinds of things about the kind of money that he has and the kind of businesses he runs? And so we gave him a really long list of questions because at the end of the day, you take nothing for granted when money's on the line, when your integrity's on the line, when your business is on the line. You don't even trust anything that comes out of their mouth. And so if this man says he's wealthy, I would really, ask the following, 20 questions about how he acquired his wealth and what his business is like. And it's very interesting, Jakson, how quickly things fall apart if you just ask a few questions. It doesn't even take that much. And then you can figure out they really don't know what they're talking about and they can only go this deep on their topic. And you're like, okay.
What does that tell you about their intentions?
Oh, the person that we're like investigating?
Yes.
Oh, they're used to people not asking questions.
Mhm.
They're used to being believed. So they don't even practice, like they don't even try
Yeah.
to give a better cover for their activities. They're used to people just buying hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And so we are constantly helping people to see through those facades and ask the right questions so you know what it is at the end of the day that you are dealing with.
What could Epstein have wanted from these government officials? Obviously, besides to stroke his own ego, what is the ulterior motive here for him to connect with, senior intelligence officials of other countries and also domestically?
I think you just asked the golden question. This is my favorite question of the whole interview right here. You fundamentally, as an intelligence officer, have to understand, why do people do what they do? If I don't understand what this person's motivations are, I can't work with them. And so I was thinking before I started this interview, what was Epstein's fundamental motivations? For most people, it's money, ego. They've watched too many Hollywood movies with 007, and it just seems like an exciting life. Some people, again, like just have to put food on the table. So they want to be our source because they need to eat and feed their family. There are various reasons why people that motivates them to do that. I think Epstein is the ultimate ego guy. Everything was about himself and his own ego and feeding the ego. Was he greedy? Yes, he was greedy, but only because that built his reputation so that he would be thought of well and he could get what he wanted.
Right.
Sex is part of it, but that's just part of ego and control.
Right.
So you look at the sex, you look at the money, you look at all this stuff, but at the end of the day, Epstein was about Epstein and nothing else.
And I think that's where we wrap it up. I mean, like, what more can you say? What more can you say? I think you've hit it right on the head, to be honest. Yeah. I think, you know, I think he was a very egocentric guy. And ultimately, sometimes we have to refer to Occam's razor, right? The most obvious explanation is the explanation, you know? One last question for you. If we shouldn't be worried about if he opened up any vulnerabilities to, let's say, national security, how should the public be looking at this? You know, from what scope should we be looking at? There are more files to be released. There are all of these redactions. How should the public be taking this?
Yeah, I think that people are generally not very trustworthy of the government because the government hasn't been very trustworthy. So it's very, like, I'm really glad they're releasing these files. I'm glad everyone's going through them. I think it's incredibly important for people to be held accountable. But more important than that, I think people need to understand what they're dealing with in the world. We're surrounded by people who don't have your best interest in mind. And whether you're talking about human smuggling or sex trafficking or someone just trying to get their hands on your money or your investments,
Right.
we need to really kind of like act like an intelligence officer, like be less trying to. I come from the South. We want to trust everyone until there's reason not to. But at the end of the day, that's really, we can't move through the world like that, or we'll be very vulnerable if we do.
Mr. Assad, you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Jakson.